Hello, this is Storybooks channel. New videos are posted every day. Subscribe and click the bell.
Benjamin is one of the richest and most influential men in the area. In deep thoughtfulness, he sat at a festively set table in an expensive, luxurious restaurant. The banquet to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the brick factory required his presence, as much as he didn't want to avoid it. Before the governor, he could not leave. After all, he is the head of the plant and the largest company in the region, Start, which with this plant and started in the distant 90s. But the governor was in no hurry to leave. It was obvious that he liked the atmosphere. Benjamin was a significant figure for him, one might say a key one. Benjamin invested well during his election campaign, both in terms of money and human resources. The governor respected Benjamin, or maybe even feared him. Only Benjamin himself could hardly endure the regional-scale gala event that began today. And now he had to sit through the banquet until the victorious end, wearing a mask of grandeur and pride. The media did not allow him to set foot almost to the banquet. Everyone was taking pictures and asking questions about the future. Benjamin, on the other hand, was always carried away into the past, which he could not change. Thank God, at least they got away from him in the restaurant. Those pesky reporters just wouldn't let them in. But even without them, everything was weighing on the company owner today. And when only the governor would go away, so Benjamin could quietly follow his example. And what for? Is Miranda the only one who revolves around him? Maybe she's the reason he doesn't leave. Miranda is Benjamin's second wife, with whom he found comfort after Wendy died. He lived with his first wife for nearly 30 years. Together they went through, as they say, fire, water, and brass pipes. She was more than just a wife, a faithful friend, comrade in arms, a reliable rear. Only he did not keep her safe. 2 years ago, his battle with cancer ended in complete defeat. His beloved Wendy died. Millions of dollars and the best doctors in the world didn't help. How insignificant did Benjamin feel then? Miranda appeared at the most difficult moment of despair and became a breath of fresh air. Her youthful energy brought the inconsolable widower back to life, and 3 months ago he decided to remarry, though it cost him the loss of his good relationship with his only daughter, Nancy. However, his girl has always been spoiled and capricious. Money spoils children. Benjamin was sure of that now. Study abroad, endless travel. Virtually no denial of any whims had gone. It's to Nancy's advantage, only my father observed. It was too late, when Wendy was already gone. His pillar, including the upbringing of his daughter. The wife had always been convinced that Nancy, despite her caprices, was a responsible, sensible person. But could it be that her daughter was so affected by her mother's death? Miranda opened Benjamin's eyes to the true state of affairs that concerned Nancy. And these revelations proved painful. The daughter spent huge sums on obscure projects, spent time in questionable companies, and ignored any comments from her father. Of course, she wasn't happy with her stepmother, who was only 7 years older. She tried to talk her father out of getting married. He could understand that, but did his own thing. And that decision ruined the relationship with his daughter. Sometimes Benjamin doubted the rightness of his choice. But more often Miranda gave him the love and care he so needed and provided indispensable help. Well, at least now, when he did not want to communicate with the governor. His wife was happily protective of him, and the governor himself clearly enjoyed her company. Benjamin realized that in his mind, he was contradicting himself. 1 minute, he did not like the fact that Miranda was hanging around the governor. The next, he was suddenly happy about it. What is this nonsense? And yet the main reason for today's deep brooding. And the sadness was not because of the death of his wife, not because of ruined relations with his daughter, not because of fatigue from the Jubilee celebration, but because of completely different events. Benjamin and his friend Liam Strakov had bought the brickyard, whose anniversary was being celebrated that day, in the early 90s for 3 cents, as he himself once said. In reality, of course, the amount was different. And it was not easy for the two young friends at the time to collect it. They nevertheless took a risk, took money at an interest from local authorities, and bought an already closed and dilapidated factory, built at the beginning of the last century, which they were able to restore, revive, and turn into a successful enterprise in a fairly short period of time. That is how the two comrades started their business. Having discovered their entrepreneurial talents, Benjamin and Liam bought several more failing factories in the city for next to nothing, but not as joint property but separately. Liam became the owner of a bakery and a dairy. Benjamin purchased a mortar plant and a building materials base. In a dozen years, both comrades managed to earn a solid capital. Benjamin named his company Start and clearly defined the direction of his work. Later, he opened a construction company, the development of which quickly went uphill. Liam's business focused on the production and sale of bread and milk. Later, his company, Eco Product, began growing fruits and vegetables. But this direction still needed development. On the whole, Eco Product flourished and brought in a solid income. Gradually, the two friends began to communicate less. Each rotated more with people useful to his personal business, but their rare meetings were enjoyable for both of them until the question of dividing the joint venture came up. The brick factory remained their common asset. When Benjamin began to modernize the plant, Liam did not support it and refused to sell his share. Liam, don't be so stubborn. Brick doesn't fit in with your line of work. You went into the food business. Sell me your share. I got big plans. I'm putting in new lines to make colored bricks. Benjamin, I'm sorry, but I have a growing son who's interested in the construction industry. So I would like to pass my share to him by inheritance, Liam answered. When Benjamin once again failed to negotiate the sale of the plant's share, he decided to send his assistants to negotiate. The deputies convinced him of this. What he didn't know was that the deputies had found some special leverage they were going to use on Liam to force a deal. In essence, it was like blackmail. But he found that out later. At the time, Benjamin was too busy with his wife's health, so he didn't find out all the circumstances of the impending negotiations. How could you do such a thing? Liam shouted indignantly into the phone. Your people threatened me and my family. You see, I didn't expect this from you. You stole from me. And then the connection was suddenly cut off. When Benjamin returned home with his dying wife, his first news was that Liam and his wife had died in a car accident. It shocked him, but he didn't have time to deal with what had happened. The next day, his Wendy died. He didn't remember well now the first days after his wife's death. Immediately after the funeral, he and his daughter went to an island in the ocean, believing it would make it easier for him to recover. But it didn't help. A couple of weeks later, he came back, tried to go back to work and couldn't. Depression and apathy set in. Again, he gave everything to his deputies. They assured him that everything was going according to plan and he had nothing to worry about. And only 6 months later, he learned that in business circles, there were rumors that he was to blame for Liam's death. Benjamin invited his deputies and only then found out that Liam had actually managed to rewrite almost all of his business to him before his death. Business, not just half of the brick factory in question, and paid by Start for the multi-million-dollar assets. Ridiculous money, far from the real value. How did this happen? In total shock, he asked his subordinates. Who prepared the documents? Who gave the order? The head of the legal department was invited, and it was Miranda, who later became his wife. Benjamin saw her for the first time, though she had been working for 7 months, and successfully, as the deputies assured her. Excuse me, Benjamin, but it was you who gave the order to prepare the documents and deliver them. Liam nonchalantly, she said. When the director invited her into his office for a private conversation. True, that was over 6 months ago. Perhaps you've forgotten. You had a lot on your mind at the time. She spoke so confidently and looked so sympathetic and understanding that Benjamin really doubted his memory. Had he really forgotten? He didn't seem very old, only 54 years old. In fact, some of his peers didn't live to be that age. How could he be so crazy as to unintentionally steal his friend's business? You can't ask him now. He and his wife died. Now, in connection with the anniversary of the brick factory, which he did not get at all what he wanted, and which was associated with such traditional events. The depressive state had taken its toll again. Benjamin's spirits were bad. He poured himself a glass of whiskey and drank it in a gulp, a pleasant warmth spread inside him. Benjamin repeated and again experienced a moment of pleasant lightness. When the third portion of the expensive strong drink was taken, Miranda came up to him. "Benjamin, the governor is leaving. We must see him off." So he said, louder than he should have done, when the wife left the restaurant with the governor. Benjamin called the waiter and told him to bring another bottle of whiskey. Now one of his guards approached him. "Benjamin, were you going home right after the governor left?" He reminded, leaning into Benjamin's ear. "Are you going to tell me what to do? The hard-drinking boss resented me. Fuck you." And then there was some foul language. The guests, who was surprised, who stared at him with derision. Benjamin pushed the guards away and moved toward the restaurant's emergency exit. As drunk as he was, he knew perfectly well that he did not want to run into the governor. He walked through the kitchen of the restaurant, dropping off some dishes and furniture on the way, opened the door, and found himself in a blind alley. The guard tried to follow him out. "Did I tell you where to go?" Benjamin yelled at him and pushed him inside. The force was enough. He closed the door, propping it up with some heavy crates, which he barely managed to move. One of them jammed against the handle and jammed the door. "I'll have something else to point at." He moved down the alley, not paying attention to the guard banging on the doors and appealing to his mind. At the corner he turned and walked to the next corner. Then he turned again. His alcohol-impaired mind refused to recognize that what he was doing was stupid and would surely put himself in danger. After some time of meaningless wandering through unfamiliar, almost unlit alleys, Benjamin realized that he was lost. He found himself among the old two-story buildings, which had been rebuilt many times by their owners, and a dog was barking at him from behind a lopsided fence. But then, for some reason, it became silent. "Michael," he called to the guard. But of course, no one answered him. "Where on earth is it?" I asked Benjamin. "I have to make a phone call." He was surprised to find himself holding in one hand a bottle of whiskey, which the waiter brought just before he decided to leave. With his free hand, Benjamin checked his pockets. There was no foam in them. He left it on the table. There didn't seem to be any way to call. He commented aloud on the lack of a phone. And then he heard footsteps behind him and happily turned around confident that the guard was his. "Found Michael," Benjamin said and staggered back. In front of him stood two complete strangers, as it seemed to him a marginal-looking lone streetlight, a few feet away, faintly illuminated this section of the alley. Benjamin could not see them in detail, bums or bandits. Instantly sobering, Benjamin tried to figure it out. "Check it out, spitting," said one of them, a lanky man of indeterminate age, pointing the light of a cell phone flashlight straight into Benjamin's face. "Good whiskey." The young man squinted at the light and adjusted his tie, which was slipping to the side. "It's important," Benjamin began. "Please tell me how to get to the prospect of the world, 'cause I'm a little lost." "Get this, he's lost." The long-haired man barked. "Hush, hush," the sleeper ordered the other stocky, broad-shouldered man to take the whiskey and check his pockets. They didn't seem to hear what Benjamin had just told them. "Excuse me," the businessman tried to start his speech again, when the long-haired man snatched the bottle from his hands. "Take it, of course, but tell me, how do I get through?" "Shut up, uncle." The long-haired man was going through his pockets. "It was empty," he said disappointedly. To the stocky man, "But there's a watch." "Take it." Benjamin obediently took off the watch. The jacket wasn't bad either, the stocky man said. "Take it." Benjamin agreed and handed them the jacket of a new suit, tailor-made just in time for the anniversary. "It's too big," remarked the stocky one as he put it on. "What else you got?" "Nothing else." Confused, Benjamin said. "Now tell me, how do I get out of here?" "Liar, uncle," the long-haired man declared. "Take off your ring and ring." Lord, he had quite forgotten the broad wedding ring and the ring with the large, flat, expensive stone, once given to him by his late wife Wendy. Benjamin tried to take them off, but his fingers must have swollen and failed. "I can't," he said doomfully. "Sleeper, help the big man out." The stocky one gave the order, and the lanky one took out a knife. The blade gleamed in the light of the full moon. Benjamin looked nervously out of the clouds. "Well, if you help me out of here, I'll thank you handsomely." "Yeah, I found some fools," declared the long-haired man and grabbed him by the arm. "Help me," Benjamin screamed, took a hard kick to the stomach, which bent him in half with pain. The long-haired man laughed, but suddenly his laughter was interrupted. "Who are you?" he asked someone. When Benjamin straightened up, he saw another tall and stout man beside him. "Put away your knife and get lost," declared Benjamin's unexpected protector. Having just lost hope of a favorable outcome of the meeting with the bandits, he squared his shoulders. "Or what?" the long-haired man defiantly declared. "You'll find out now." Benjamin hasn't been in a fight since his college days, but his hands don't seem to have forgotten. Now that he had an unexpected partner, he should take his chance to fight back. He took pleasure in punching the stocky one in the jaw with all his might. And the lanky man was already lying on the ground, being pounded by a stranger. Just on Benjamin, a hail of blows came from the stocky man. He defended himself and tried to punch himself, but the forces were clearly unequal. And soon the businessman couldn't stay on his feet. He tried to protect his face with his hands, but got punched in different parts of his body. At first it hurt, then the pain dulled, and then he heard a siren and passed out, getting hit in the head. When he opened his eyes, he saw a man in a blue medical uniform in front of him shining a small flashlight in his face, where he asked Benjamin, "Who? The guy who stood up for me?" He had already been taken to the hospital. "The situation there is more complicated than yours. A stab wound." "Oh my God, it's my fault. Give me the phone. I need to make an urgent phone call." Benjamin was lying on a comfortable bed in the VIP ward of the center, the regional hospital, and he ate an omelette with mozzarella and tomatoes, washed down with tomato juice with an appetite. From time to time, he glanced at the bed next door, where the young man who had stepped in for him the previous night was lying under an IV. He looked to be in his 30s, maybe a little more, maybe less. It was hard to tell his age from his thick beard, which looked like it had not been touched by a barber's hands in a long time. The dark hair also looked long uncut and covered a rather high forehead. The guy was covered with a blanket up to his chin. Only his arm, which was attached to the drip, was lying on top of the blanket. It was clear that he was taller than average and had a fairly strong build. He had not yet regained consciousness after the operation, and Benjamin waited patiently until he could finally talk to him and thank him. Benjamin himself, after yesterday's fight, he got off with multiple bruises and a mild concussion. However, he felt surprisingly fine. There was no nausea. There was almost no pain in his body or head. The restaurant food was pleasing both in taste and appearance. He wanted to go home soon. How lucky was he that this young man wasn't afraid to step in? He made Benjamin himself perk up and feel younger. But unfortunately, the young man himself had not escaped the knife wound. But Benjamin immediately made sure that the best doctors took care of him and put them in the same room. "Do you think he could use a TV?" Benjamin asked a young nurse who was taking away the dirty dishes. "I think he could use it." She smiled and handed him the remote. Benjamin pressed a button and turned on the big TV hanging on the wall. Immediately, he was on the regional news. There was nothing in the crime reports about last night's incident. His assistants had arranged with the police to keep Benjamin's name out of any reports. Another nurse came in to turn off the IV, and the guy in the next bed immediately opened his eyes. "How are you feeling?" she asked. "I'm fine." He stood up a little and looked around. "Am I in a hospital?" "Yes, and you should lie down," she commanded. "The doctor will be here soon. I'll let him know you're awake now." "Well, hello, my savior." Benjamin said hello as soon as the nurse came out. "I would like to shake your hand, but I can't get up myself, and you are supposed to be lying down. Thank you so much for standing up for me last night. I don't know how my meeting with those scumbags would have ended if you hadn't come to my rescue." The boy answered the greeting with his hand. He touched his stomach under the covers. "I've been operated on." "Yeah, it's all done to a high standard. I took care of it. Let's check with the doctor what you can eat. You can order anything you want from the restaurants. We'll have menus delivered as soon as possible. I'll pay for everything. I hope you won't mind." "No, I don't mind." By the way, my name is Benjamin, the owner of Start. What's your name? Robert? Robert. What's your last name? I don't know. Are you saying that after yesterday's fight you have memory loss alarmingly? Benjamin asked. No, it happened before. How did it happen? I don't know much about myself, and I remember me in the same neighborhood where the fight happened yesterday. A month ago, an old lady saw me. How I ended up there, I don't know. I didn't know where I was. I didn't remember how I got there. All I remember was that my name was Robert. The old lady took pity on me, invited me to her house. I stayed with her for the last month. And then last night I heard you screaming for help, and I decided to intervene. And my grandmother must have called the police. Thank her very much. What are we going to do with you now? Benjamin thought about it. Okay, we'll figure it out. I'll help in a moment, he declared. A little later, the doctor examined the boy and said that no important organs had been affected, and that he could safely count on a quick recovery. When Benjamin's daughter, Nancy, arrived, the father noticed her curious and appraising glance toward Robert. He introduced them to each other. Who is this guy? Why are you in the same room with him? Whispering, leaning into his father's ear, asked the girl when his roommate covered his eyes again. He saved me. Nancy answered Benjamin just as quietly. Why did you have to go anywhere without Michael? She resented him. The question is inappropriate. Don't you dare make pretenses to your father, Benjamin snapped at her. Better tell me, how are you doing with the new project? Softly and with a smile, he asked. Nancy finally decided to open her own, quite acceptable business. That made her father very happy. That's just the direction she chose, not a family business. Women's beauty salon barbershop is simply a steep and expensive barbershop for men. Miranda did not like this idea at all, but his father easily invested money in this project. Since my daughter used to do even less promising things, she invested a solid sum in a shelter for homeless animals. Then she got into yoga and poured a lot of money into it. Then she joined a country club for the passionate and dedicated. Then she joined a green organization and blew a bunch more money on their events, sometimes against the law. After one unauthorized rally during which a fight broke out, Nancy ended up at the police station, where she spent the whole night until her father got her out. Benjamin. He really wanted his daughter to learn how to earn her own money. He considered it an important skill, even for the well-to-do daughter of a millionaire father. The opening of the salon is next week, Nancy reported. I was hoping to see you among the honored guests. You'll have time to heal. Or should I postpone the opening? I hope they let me go home. What does your savior do? Where does he live? Again, very quietly asked the daughter. Again, her father noticed her extremely interested look towards the young man, who seemed to be asleep. Intrigued, with a smile, Benjamin asked, He's a brave fellow. I appreciate him, and I want to help him. I'll give him a chance to make a name for himself. What does that mean? He helped me, and now I'll help him, Benjamin replied, and told his daughter about Robert's memory loss. Do you want to find his family? That's in between. But it's not like he has them either. He's staying with us for now. You seriously bring a stranger into the house and put him up in one of your apartments to start until he gets stronger. I guess let him live in our house. Benjamin pondered aloud quietly. And then maybe Dad can find a place in our business. He's a bum, after all. And you take him home in an indignant whisper to Nancy. Give him some money and let him go. It's bad enough that he's in the same room with you. I've never seen you treat strangers this way before. No one's ever saved me before. Besides, he reminds me a lot of someone. But that's not the point. For once in my life, I wanted to really help someone, and I have the opportunity. So I'm going to follow my wish. I see it's no use arguing with you, Nancy concluded. But if he's going to live in our house, it wouldn't hurt to get him cleaned up. He's getting up already. The doctor has allowed him to go quietly. Then tomorrow I'll get my best barber to do something decent with his head and beard. Glad you got involved in helping a good man with a satisfied smile, Benjamin declared. But you'd have to ask him. Then the boy turned on his side and opened his eyes. Robert immediately turned to him. Nancy, how would you feel about a little change of image? And she did the scissors next to her head and chin with her hands. I can get a hairdresser if you don't mind. I would be much obliged to you. With a smile, the boy answered. Why do you talk to each other like that? Benjamin became indignant. You look almost the same age. Keep it simple. That's right, Nancy agreed. The next day, Benjamin's daughter entered the room with a red-haired man of uncertain age. Dressed stylishly and fashionably, he stroked his neat beard and looked thoughtfully at Robert, whom he seated in a chair and then set to work. Benjamin grinned when Nancy and her barber admired his tall stature and pumped-up torso. Robert before covering him with a haircut cape, though the cubes of his abs were covered with a bandage. The rest of his body spoke eloquently of his familiarity with strength training or exercise. While the barber worked on Robert's head and beard, Nancy drove to the mall. She soon returned and brought with her several bags of well-known brands. So these are your clothes and shoes, she said, and put the bags beside Robert's bed. I hope I didn't get the wrong size. The transformation of Benjamin's savior was above reproach. The red-headed barber was pleased with his work. He handed the mirror to Robert. What do you think? It's great. Thank you, barber. With a satisfied smile, he gathered his tools into his suitcase, and after saying goodbye, left. Nancy once again walked around the guy sitting in the chair. It was a very different matter. Did she appreciate the result? Will you try on some clothes? Give Robert a break, her father objected. Besides, it's lunchtime. The food's coming from the restaurant. I'll see you tomorrow. I'll see you tomorrow. Nancy nodded to Robert and then jumped out of the room. How do you like my daughter? Proudly asked Benjamin. Isn't she beautiful? Certainly, agreed Robert. But I can't give her in marriage. All the potential suitors rejected. She used to have kids at her age, and she's still a kid herself. You're lucky with your daughter, the boy remarked. She is a kind and open person. My wife Miranda, she's a stepmother, Nancy, thinks differently. Sometimes she reproaches me for spoiling my daughter. She once called her an emotional, overprivileged bitch. Of course, I immediately warned her to be careful what she said about my daughter. But maybe Miranda is right about something. I think she's wrong. It's her subjective opinion. I wish it were. Your spouse must have come from a poor family. She's been doing everything on her own. That's why she's annoyed with Nancy, who grew up in a different environment. And you're right, and you seem to be a good judge of character. Benjamin looked at the boy with surprise. A few days later, both Benjamin and his savior were discharged, with a stylish haircut and new clothes. Robert looked like a model from a fashion magazine, and he held himself with a rare confidence and freedom, as if he had always looked this good. Father, do you mind if I steal Robert? Asked Nancy, who suddenly appeared on the threshold of the room. When the men were about to leave, there was a car waiting for us, actually. What do you need it for? Father was astonished. I want to show him the salon and the barber shop. The opening is in 3 days. In fact, I'd like to take a picture of Robert at my salon to post on social media. For publicity purposes, the girl declared. You won't refuse, will you? She turned to the young man. On the contrary, thank you for the opportunity to be useful. I'm for the balance of taking and giving. You've already given me a lot. I want to give something in return, so you can use me for peaceful and good purposes, Robert said. With a smile, then you will bring Robert home yourself, Benjamin ordered. All right, but don't wait for us anytime soon. Just as she was leaving, Nancy said, We'll have lunch somewhere on our own. She took him by the arm and they walked quickly toward the exit. They spent the whole day together. They went to the barber shop, where professional photographers took a bunch of pictures of Robert from different angles, in different backgrounds, and in different environments. Then Nancy decided to keep him company in the photo. After the photo shoot, they ate lunch at a restaurant and drove around town in the car. The girl chattered away and told Robert about her past projects and the business prospects she had just started. It was obvious that she was very enthusiastic about her new business, and the boy only smiled at her as he listened and kept his eyes on her. Nancy herself wanted to look at Robert the whole time. He looked stunning. She hadn't tried for nothing. But to deny his natural beauty too, it wasn't worth it. What struck her most was that he wasn't the least bit embarrassed by her familiar surroundings. It was as if he had always lived like this himself. Robert had given her a gallant hand, opened the door, pulled her chair into the restaurant. He knew the restaurant menu very well and ordered unusual dishes for the common man. Who was he really? Thought Nancy with surprise. What can you tell us about yourself? She asked at the coffee shop they stopped at before they went home. Because I talk all day and you don't say anything. Unfortunately, I have nothing to say. Your father told me you have amnesia. How do you live with that? I hope to remember everything someday. Promise me I'll be the first person you tell about yourself. Okay. With a smile, Nancy replied. Boy, is it beautiful. Benjamin's country house had 3 floors, where there were bedrooms, libraries, a huge hall for receiving guests, dining room, billiard pool, winter garden, summer terraces, and rooms for helpers. Robert was invited to choose a room on any floor. Mine is on the top floor, Nancy whispered in his ear. There are 2 guest bedrooms next to it. One is very comfortable, then show me. Robert whispered back to her. We are upstairs. Nancy informed her father and led her guest to the elevator. Don't be too long, Benjamin shouted after them. Come down to dinner in 20 minutes. An elevator with glass doors took them up to the 3rd floor. There is a small library, a mini gym with exercise machines, and most of all, there is a wonderful view from the windows. Nancy explained as she led Robert to the bedroom. This is my room. She pointed to one of the doors. I often live in a city apartment, but I go to my parents' house often, especially when Miranda is away. I try not to cross paths with her. We can't stand each other, and I'm glad our rooms are on different floors. This bedroom, on the other hand, I'd suggest you take it. Or would you like to see both guest rooms? I trust your choice, Robert said, with the same wonderful smile. The room, with its large bed and beautiful furniture, was bright, spacious, and comfortable. The guest liked it as much as the rest of the house. This is the bathroom. Nancy pointed to one of the doors, and here is the closet. But we have yet to fill it with your things we'll buy. The 3 of them ate dinner. Miranda was in town, delayed by business. All 3 of them joked and laughed a lot. Benjamin could not recall such a relaxed, pleasant atmosphere at the table. After Wendy's death, his daughter was obviously in a great mood, which was a rarity lately. She did not sit down at the table with Miranda. It was even good that his wife wasn't home yet. Thought, Benjamin, how incredibly delicious your cook is. Robert marveled as he put the second portion of meatloaf on his plate. Yes, Slaga knows how to prepare the most exquisite dishes, Benjamin agreed. She has been working for us for a long time, and we are very happy with her. But it's hard to please Miranda. Please, let's not spoil dinner, Nancy asked, remembering her. And her mood immediately noticeably deteriorated. I'll have my tea in my room, she said, and got up from the table, taking a large mug with her. Damn me, Benjamin was upset. We were getting along so well. Robert went up the stairs to the 3rd floor after dinner and went into the library. He looked at the spines of books, chose one, and sat down in a comfortable chair, near which a floor lamp was burning. A pleasant breeze was blowing from the open window, and the young man immersed himself in reading. He did not notice when Nancy approached him. What are you reading? She asked. Robert looked at the cover of the book. Really? She raised her eyebrows in surprise. Do you read Matsubase in the original? You know Japanese. It turns out that I do, Robert replied, simply surprised. I don't mind. If I sit here, am I disturbing you? No, of course, I'd be glad of your company. Can you read aloud? Nancy asked, and Robert read a few poems in Japanese. After all, sounds like fun to me. I could never get through it. And of course you don't remember where you studied the language. I like that I know it. Do you have this book in your library? Daddy got it from the real Japanese. I was into hockey at the time, but that quickly passed. I kept the book. Can you translate it into English? The last one I read. The girl asked the frost to cover him. The wind makes his bed. Abandoned child is just about me. Nancy remarked sadly. I often feel like an abandoned child. It's after my mother died. I'm sorry, said Robert quietly. He put the book down and took the girl's hand. I'd like to take a walk on your garden paths. Would you like to go together? That's a wonderful idea. Nancy perked up. I'll show you around. They walked around the garden until late at night and talked about literature, music, and painting. It turned out that Robert knew a lot about these subjects, and Nancy listened to him without hiding her surprise. Miranda returned just as they were walking, and to the joy of the girl who did not want to meet her stepmother. And in the morning, Miranda left before Robert and Nancy came down for breakfast. Benjamin was chugging his coffee, staring at his phone. He looked extremely worried. "What's the matter?" "Dad?" Nancy asked, wishing her father a good morning. "My interpreter was ill at the wrong time," my father answered, nodding in greeting to his daughter and guest. "And today, the Japanese are coming to conclude the contract. Now my assistants are urgently looking for a replacement. It's all in 3 hours. You need a Japanese translator?" Nancy asked. I sat down at the table, and Robert pulled out a chair for her. "I guess they understand English," Benjamin said without taking his eyes off the phone. "Robert knows Japanese," Nancy declared. "It's true." Benjamin took his eyes off the cell phone screen and stared at Robert. "Yes," replied the boy modestly. "And can you be a translator for the negotiations with the Japanese today?" "I can if you are interested in my candidacy." "Robert, you are my savior." Benjamin was delighted and exclaimed. Quickly dialed a text message and, putting the phone on the table, began with an appetite. "Eat a sandwich with caviar. Again, you saved me. Good for you." Robert smiled and began to eat his breakfast. "And we have to find a way to solve your problem with your documents." Benjamin thought about it. "I will use my connections to make your passport official, but we'll have to decide on the last name. What if I say you're a distant relative? That's fine. After we sign the contract with the Japanese, we'll take care of your paperwork. Nancy?" He turned to his daughter. "Somewhere, please pick up some clothes for Robert in formal style for today's meeting." "Don't thank me," Nancy laughed as her father left, and Robert looked at her meaningfully. "Are you angry with me?" she asked seriously. "No," he answered with a smile. "Come on, let's get ready. We do not have much time. It's been a day." Nancy stretched out on the big bed in Robert's room with a smile. He himself was in the shower, and she didn't feel like getting up just yet. It was such a lovely morning. She called the maid and asked her to bring them coffee and scones to Robert's room. Yesterday, after a successfully signed contract with the Japanese, Benjamin suggested that everyone in the meeting have dinner at the restaurant. So they were joined by Nancy in a luxurious black floor-length dress, with Robert dressed in a strict dark suit and a white shirt and tie. They looked very harmonious. The two of them drove home in Nancy's car and went to their rooms at first. But not 2 minutes later, Nancy quickly entered Robert's room, who had already taken off his jacket and shirt. Immediately, she kissed him vigorously. Passion instantly seized them both. Nancy, with a smile, remembering the previous night, heard a knock at the door. "Yes, come in." She hoped to see the maid with the coffee, but her father was standing in the doorway. "What are you doing here?" Surprised, he asked, waiting for the maid with the coffee. Frustrated, Nancy declared. She didn't want to advertise her relationship with Robert. Not right now, anyway. And then her father showed up at such a bad time. "What did you want?" "I'm going to see Robert, but better later." And Benjamin closed the door from the back. "Oh, shit," Nancy exclaimed. Such a morning spoiled. She thought with annoyance that her father would want to talk. But when she met him later in the dining room, he acted as if nothing had happened. And she was relieved. And Benjamin himself did not know how to behave. He was the one who had brought Robert into the house. Besides, his daughter was in the guest room, so she'd come to him herself. Yeah, that's not surprising. Last night, there was more than a spark between young people. There was lightning. It was too good, visible with a wistful look. He was on his way to the office this morning. "You know, Miranda," he said, sitting next to him in the back seat to his wife, "I think it's high time my daughter got married." "You found her a fiancé," his wife grinned. "She gets along very well with Robert, so let them get married." Benjamin voiced the thought that was forming in his mind. "Are you ready to give your daughter in marriage to a bum?" Miranda was surprised. "You know nothing about this Robert, except his name and what he has told you about himself. That is where you are wrong." Benjamin protested. "He's already managed to surprise me a couple of times with his knowledge of Japanese." In my opinion, it is a bad idea anyway. But Benjamin had already made up his mind to talk to his daughter after the grand opening of the beauty salon and barber shop. During the buffet for the honored guests, he saw the lovers looking at each other again, Robert and Nancy, and in the evening already at home, he asked his daughter to come into his office. Nancy, there is a conversation, he began. Don't give me any lectures. Abruptly interrupted him the girl. I am an adult and have the right to a private life, in which you do not have to interfere. Wait a minute, my dear. Perhaps you will like it if I interfere. What do you mean? Nancy asked in astonishment. I don't mind. If you and Robert get married, are you trying to get me into good hands again? Nancy's daughter said, I resent that. Before you wanted to match me with the sons of your business partners, and now you are ready to give me in marriage to a man who you know a week. But that doesn't stop you from sleeping with him. That's no reason to get married anyway. I don't want to get married at all. That's the spirit of contradiction in you. I can see that you two get along very well. I would even say that you have feelings between you. I can see that. And Robert is a good man, so why don't you start a family? I have other plans for my life. Cut off Nancy. We'll make small adjustments to them, my father countered. And it doesn't bother you that Robert has nothing on his mind. But I have more than enough. Benjamin was not a stranger to confrontation, and I'll give him the brickyard as a wedding present. Now he will develop the business on his own. He certainly has a head on his shoulders. In fact, everything is fine-tuned there, and I will be informed of his decisions. So everything will be under control, including me. Is that what you want? Nancy asked, becoming increasingly exasperated. Yes, I'm ready to trust you. He passed the test. He stood up for me. He risked his life for me. So you won't let anyone hurt you, Nancy. You must admit that you like him, don't you? Softer already? Father asked. I see the way you look at him. Dad, this is not how I imagined the whole thing before the wedding. More calmly, Nancy said. I wanted a declaration of love and a marriage proposal in a romantic setting. And here's my own father trying to make me feel like an obnoxious thing. Are you right? Let Robert propose to you, as he should, at your behest. That's none of your business. Just don't you dare refuse him. I can see he has feelings for you. It's just that he knows you two are from different worlds. That's why he'll never risk making a decisive move. Only he's in our world now too, and that's what I'm going to tell him. Nancy waved her hand and walked out of her father's office. In fact, she was really quite keen on Robert. But this was the kind of approach her father took to her personal life that seemed unacceptable to her. Anger overwhelmed her. She went into her room and closed the door behind her, put on her headphones, and turned on the music. She did not hear Robert come to the door and knock quietly. And when she didn't open the door, he went down the stairs to meet Benjamin, who had called him in to talk. The large windows of the bedroom on the 24th floor had a fantastic view of the city at night. Robert took off his jacket, hung it on the back of his chair, and cast his eyes over the king-sized bed. Today was his wedding day to Nancy. The wedding night lay ahead, the most joyous long awaited for two loving hearts. But it was hard on the young spouse's soul. When Benjamin invited him into his office 3 months ago, he had no idea what kind of conversation awaited him. Robert, perhaps what I'm about to say will seem strange to you. Benjamin began, but I'd like you and Nancy to get married. Wait, hear me out to the end. I see that you two have developed a close relationship, and I see how my daughter has changed for the better with you. Yes, and our relationship with her has gotten better, and I've grown very fond of you. You're like a son to me. I suggest that you legally join our family. As a wedding gift, I'll sign over the brick factory to you. It is a thriving, very profitable enterprise, which you can develop as you want. Nancy has an apartment in town. But if you want your own country house, we'll decide that too. You can stay in this house too. There's plenty of room. What do you say? How do you feel about my daughter? Benjamin, I must confess that I have grown fond of your daughter, Robert said at the time. And I think she has a soft spot for me too. I am sincerely glad that you are willing to entrust me with her future. But I do not know whether she will accept my proposal. Well, find out. Buy her a ring. Propose in some romantic setting. Girls appreciate that. Yeah, well, you'll figure it out, I guess. And I, as they say, bless your union. After signing the contract with the Japanese, Benjamin handed Robert a bank card, telling him that he had earned this money honestly. After checking the balance, the young man saw a fairly large amount for a few hours of work as an interpreter. This money would be enough for a ring and other trappings for a romantic evening. He didn't know if Nancy would agree, but he was more concerned about something else entirely with the girl he managed to love. Robert wasn't exactly being honest, and he never dared to tell the truth then. Nancy accepted his proposal happily, and now they are legally husband and wife 3 months later. During this time, their feelings only grew stronger. Robert was already working at the factory that Benjamin had donated. Successfully handling the management position, he quickly figured out the production processes. Profits were growing, and it is possible not to change anything in his life since it has made such a turn. But for some reason, it was after the wedding that Robert realized he had to tell his lawful wife everything. And he really regretted that he hadn't done it sooner. "Honey, will you help me get my dress off?" Nancy came up behind him and hugged him. "I can't do it myself," she added coquettishly. "I need to talk to you decisively," Robert declared, turning away from the window and looking Nancy straight in the eyes. "What's that look? Are you frightening me?" the bride said excitedly. "This is not how I imagined our wedding night. What's the matter? Did you remember something from your past life? Let's sit down," the boy suggested. He sat Nancy down on the bed and sat down in the chair in front of him. "I have to confess to you that I didn't really have any memory loss." "What?" Nancy looked at him in amazement. "Who are you, and why were you pretending?" "I am Liam's son." "But why were you hiding it?" Nancy was shocked. "Your father, Benjamin, he was responsible for the death of my parents. He wanted to take all our family business and destroy our whole family. He succeeded in the first one, and the second one killed my parents. I lived abroad for a long time, studying, working. My father's assistants after my parents died. They advised me not to return to my homeland. They were sure that your father would get to me, but I came anyway. I wanted to avenge their deaths. I hated your father so much, I wanted to kill him." "Robert, what are you talking about? My father had nothing to do with your parents' death. How do you know?" "He got my father, through his men, to sign papers handing over almost his entire business. But that wasn't enough for him, so he killed them." "Shut up, please. I want to tell you everything. I came back to my hometown a few months ago, dreaming of getting to Benjamin. But I could only watch him from afar because there were always guards around. I lived in the most backward part of town. I had some money left in my accounts, but I was advised not to withdraw anything so that I wouldn't be remembered. The night of the fight, I followed your father. I thought I was lucky that this was the right moment to do what I wanted to do." "Did you really want to kill him?" Was Nancy horrified. "Yes, I did." "Then why did you stand up for him? Those scumbags, if they didn't kill him, they would have hurt him." "Well, I couldn't let that happen. This is my revenge. I have a good reason, and they have no right to do that to Benjamin. I don't get it. You risked your life to protect my father, only to kill him yourself. At first, I couldn't let anyone else do it, and then the fight didn't end the way I thought it would. I was wounded, and your father took it upon himself to help me. His attitude toward me made me doubt that he was really such a mean and greedy man. As I was convinced by my father's deputies, whom I considered to be family friends, I decided to do nothing. I suddenly wanted to get to know your father better. But I couldn't tell you who I really was, and amnesia. It was the first thing that came to my mind. And the more I got to know Benjamin, the more I doubted that he was capable of such a ruthless way to deal with my parents. Why did you marry me? I fell in love with you. It's true. And now you no longer want to avenge the death of your parents. You don't blame my father for anything anymore. My attitude towards him has changed, partly because of you. He doesn't look like a killer himself. Maybe he's not responsible for Mom and Dad's deaths. I want to find out. I'm sure my father had nothing to do with it. And I'm ready to help you find out the truth." Tears glistened in Nancy's eyes. Robert knelt down and took her hands in his. "You gave meaning back to my life," he said, kissing her fingers. When I first saw you in the hospital room, I thought I could have lived my whole life with a girl like you. Before I knew it, I fell in love with you. Nancy ran her hand over his head. You know who I am now. Don't you regret marrying me? On the contrary, I've always wondered who you really are. What did you have in your past? And I was afraid that this past would catch up with us, and it would turn out that you had some obligations to people that you didn't remember. Everything is finally falling into place, and we're going to get to the truth together. Let me help you out of your dress, Robert suggested. He gently undid the many buttons on Nancy's back, kissing every inch of her body. As the dress slipped to the floor, he hugged his wife tightly. Ironically, Robert had become the owner of the business over which his father and Benjamin had once quarreled, and now he had to find out what had really happened. For several days, he went through the documents, checked numbers and dates, checked reports, plans, and other things that would help him to get closer to solving the mystery that had tormented him. More often than not, he found Benjamin Miranda's second wife's signature on the documents. She was the head of the legal department when his father was forced to sign the documents. But later, after she married Benjamin, she took over part of the Stark Company, and most of the assets are Liam's businesses. Nancy, your stepmother has something to do with this whole thing we're dealing with over dinner, Robert told his wife. I think it wouldn't hurt us to find out where she goes besides work and who she meets, said the girl. I have a trusted person who will find out. A few days later, the couple got a report with pictures of where Miranda goes and what she does outside the home and out of the office. It turned out that she had been meeting with one of the deputies of Robert's father's firm, one of those who had assured him of Benjamin's guilt in Liam's death. And it turned out that Miranda's mesher was also her lover, as eloquently testified by photos of their meeting at the massage parlor. She is cheating on Daddy. Outraged Nancy. I'll give him those photos. Let him deal with her. The fact of adultery is clear, agreed Robert. But the involvement in my parents' death is still questionable. Miranda sat in the chair with clenched fists. How long she had walked to the goal, and how close she was. Her plan could come true in the very near future. But now that bum Robert intervened, where the hell had he come from? Everything could have worked out just perfectly. If that night Benjamin had been drunk and gone, without a guard, that damn savior hadn't come out of the ground. And now he had also taken over the brickyard, and that was the principal object of her desires. Miranda was 10 years old when her father hanged himself. Doctors said the suicide was due to lingering depression and his unwillingness to get treatment. Her mother thought otherwise. Her father had worked at the brick factory for more than 20 years. He started out as a simple worker right out of high school, and by perestroika, he was deputy director. He fought to the last against the closure of the factory. Only the director decided otherwise, and simply gave up. Then Miranda's father intended to buy the plant himself, colluding with his factory colleagues, but the purchase was intercepted by two young upstarts, Benjamin and Liam. They paid more. Mom is sure the bribes were given to the right people. Dad ended up out of business. All of the colleagues with whom he wanted to buy the plant together were called to work at the newly opened plant, but Miranda's father was not invited. They simply forgot about him. Pride did not allow him to remind himself. He gave almost a quarter of a century to his beloved plant. With tears in his eyes, said little Miranda's mother. After the death of his father, and go to ask for a place there, to beg on his knees. No way. Let them choke on those filthy upstarts. But know this, my girl. They're the ones to blame for your daddy's death. Liam and Benjamin, those two ghouls, went on for years. And every time, when the local newspaper or television glimpsed a story about the next achievements of these businessmen, my mother tearfully repeated that if they had not brought her father to his grave, she would have lived like a princess. As it was, they were barely surviving. So her mother worked hard that she passed away early, leaving Miranda, who had hardly celebrated her adulthood. All alone, after graduating from high school, the girl went to law school. She tried to study only for straight A's. And in her head, she was stuck. One thought was that those responsible for her father's death would be punished, and their successful enterprise would go to Miranda. She changed her last name, so her family's enemies wouldn't find out. Whose daughter is she? Her path to working at Start was a thorny one. She had to be the best at what she did to get the job. She needed experience. Miranda gained it through hard work, constant study, and advanced training. When a vacancy came up in the legal department, she could have headed it by now, but the place of the head was taken at the time. She went as an ordinary lawyer. She passed the interview brilliantly, and less than a month later, when the head of the department died suddenly, she was appointed to replace, because she had already managed to win the favor of all the people in the company. On whom did this appointment depend? At the time, Benjamin's wife was already seriously ill, and Benjamin himself had a conflict with Liam. Miranda immediately had a plan. How could this be used to get Liam's business transferred to Benjamin? Next, yes, she was ready to move on, and she did. But first, she prepared the documents and hired people to get Liam to sign them. Those people had nothing to do with Start, but it looked like Benjamin had sent them. In addition, one of Liam's deputies had fallen under Miranda's influence and agreed to help her, but she was still very risky. Everything could have been revealed at any moment. Benjamin was in Israel with his sick wife, that on his return he could have met Liam. Then it would all come out. Unhappy, chance set the record straight, only it was set up on Miranda's order. So she got rid of one of the culprits of her father's death, and all his assets went to Benjamin. After his wife's death, he delegated all reins of the company to his deputies. And Miranda had already managed to gain their trust. The first deputy became her lover, and so she was in charge of all the economic affairs, and certainly the legal advice went directly through her. When Benjamin finally realized he owned Liam's business, he tried to figure out how this could have happened without his knowledge. That's when Miranda panicked, but at a personal meeting she did not show it, and tried to turn on the full power of her feminine charms to her immense surprise. Benjamin began to actively show his interest in her, and she by skillful manipulation strengthened it with each new meeting. Benjamin quickly wanted her affection and comfort, and she readily played the role of a loving, caring, and understanding woman. No one knows what it cost her, but it was impossible to achieve her goal without it. Everything Liam had went to Benjamin, and now will go to her, along with all of Benjamin's own assets. She had to become his wife. She had achieved that too. How she wanted to deal with the daughter of her hated husband. But she had to wait patiently for the right moment. Only sometimes the nerves still gave up, said too much Benjamin, and his daughter was too angry Miranda. That Nancy, a spoiled and pampered slacker. She got everything that Miranda herself could have had. If her father could have become the owner of the brickyard that Liam and Benjamin had so brazenly taken over from him. With what did they end up encouraging him to commit suicide? Miranda managed to turn her daughter against her father, and the father himself against his daughter. In time, she planned to disinherit this pampered doll by his hands, but now she is married. And this Robert is very complicated. What bothered Miranda most was that no one knew who he was or where he came from. And it was obvious that he was genuinely in love with Nancy, and she was in love with him too. So the task became more difficult. The brickyard was already out of Miranda's hands. Benjamin could not be allowed to give his daughter and son-in-law anything else. We must act. We must make sure that the Start company passed into Miranda's hands. But how exactly was this question going through her head when the hated husband suddenly entered her office? He was blacker than a cloud. "Darling, am I glad to see you?" Radiantly, smiling, said Miranda, "Is something the matter? You shouldn't be happy." Benjamin yelled, demanding an explanation, and he threw a pile of pictures on her desk. Someone had taken a picture of Miranda at the massage parlor with her young lover. This guy, the massage therapist, was her outlet. Otherwise, she would have gone crazy. From her overflowing constant disgust with Benjamin and his daughter. "What does that mean?" "Answer me," yelled Benjamin. Miranda frantically tried to think of something, only it was too obvious to refute. She realized that she was cornered, that all her plans to destroy Benjamin had collapsed. "Stupid question, Benjamin." Quite calmly, she said, "I'm having a wonderful time with a young man in these pictures. After all, according to their prenup, she'll have a nice payoff too. Then she'll come up with a new plan. If she can't take over the whole business, At least she can wipe Benjamin off the face of the earth, as well as his dead friend Liam. She'll be able to cheat on me for a long time. And how long do you think I could stand living with you? Miranda's face contorted with a grimace of hatred and contempt. I am a young, beautiful woman, and you are a balding, fat man who has lost all his masculine appeal. Do you think that married life with you can bring me joy and happiness? So why did you marry me? Discouraged? Asked Benjamin. His righteous anger was replaced by resentment. Was it only for the money? Oh no, my dear. I wanted more. Miranda covered her face with her hands. If you only knew how much I hate you. How I dream every day of your death. But why? Benjamin asked confusedly. Do you remember Stephen? I don't recall. Even more confused, Benjamin said. You don't even remember him, and he hung himself. Because of you and Liam. I didn't know. You never told me about it. But why because of us? What did we do to him? He wanted to buy the brickyard he'd taken over from him. You and your friend. I remembered him, but wait a minute. I don't understand anything. He told us he changed his mind about buying the factory. We asked him for a job afterwards, but he refused. I don't believe you. Miranda yelled, hissing with anger. You and Liam ruined my father. And I wanted revenge on you more than anything in the world, and I almost succeeded. At least with Liam. So you had something to do with Liam's death. Benjamin marveled. Too bad you and your little girl weren't in the same car. Miranda grabbed her purse and ran out of the office. She was shaking. She couldn't get a word out. She dashed across the floor, took the elevator down to the underground parking lot, and got into her car. Tears welled up in her eyes, the terrible pain torturing her soul. How she wished she could just let it go. It was simply unbearable. Miranda let out an angry growl and pressed the gas pedal. The car raced forward. The phone rang. It was Liam's deputy, who had helped her get him out of the way. But now he kept demanding money and Miranda's promised position at Start. She grinned angrily. His plans for some promised future collapsed today just as hers had. Miranda, I need to see you urgently, he yelled into the phone. Okay, I'll be right there. Tears streamed from her eyes. The car flew at high speed. Miranda did not know what to do or how to live. She wanted so much revenge on those who had broken her life, but it didn't work out. How painful it is to realize that. How much it hurts. And suddenly there was a sharp thump and a scraping of metal. She didn't even realize it. Instant death and darkness. A year went by. Slada was fussing over the stove. Dinner was almost ready. But there was something else to add to the potatoes. She liked everything to be perfect. Clara, sit down at the table. Benjamin called her. It was a family dinner. Only Nancy and Robert's closest family and Clara's daughter, with her husband and granddaughter, were at the table. It had been a difficult year for the Benjamin family. Slaga then found folk recipes to support Benjamin, not only with pills and shots. She tried to cook those dishes that he particularly liked. He spent a lot of time at home, giving all the management of the company to his son-in-law, who turned out to be Liam's son, which was another shock for Benjamin. And he finally realized who this young man reminded him of. And now his daughter bore the last name of his longtime friend Robert and Nancy. Of course, did not tell Benjamin that his future son-in-law at first wanted to take his life. So too many unpleasant events and discoveries occurred, and his health was shaken. And all were glad that in the person of the house cook he unexpectedly found a pleasant companion and a caring woman, devoid of selfish ambitions. Slara is the same age as Benjamin. They turned out to have many common interests, and the values of life coincided. Both considered family. The most important thing in his life, Slaga was widowed 15 years ago. But she had a daughter, whom she successfully married. And then a granddaughter was born. The woman worked at Benjamin's for more than 10 years and valued the place. She loved the family, until Miranda came into it. But even though she wanted to run away right after Benjamin remarried, she stayed and decided to adjust and just did her job honestly. Ignoring Miranda's unwarranted comments about her, after she died, Benjamin just wanted to support her. And it turned out that there were feelings between them. Unexpected for both, and a month ago, Benjamin proposed marriage. Slaga accepted his proposal and immediately, at the request of her future husband, found a girl to replace her in the kitchen. Only some of the dishes the mistress of the big house preferred to cook herself. "Clara, sit down at last." Benjamin got up from the table and led his wife into the dining room by the hand. "I have a toast." He raised his glass of red wine. "I'm very glad we're together today." He nodded to Robert and his son-in-law Slag. "And that soon there will be more of us." He looked meaningfully at his daughter, who had her hand on her pregnant belly. "I'm glad that my personal life has become happy." He kissed his wife's hand that the people close to me are getting along. "I'm glad my daughter's business is thriving. Daughter, your beauty salon. The barber shop turned out to be a successful venture. I'm glad I can hand my business over to you with a like heart, Robert." He turned to the guy, "Especially since part of it is rightfully yours. Thank you all for being with me today. Here's to you, my dear family." Benjamin, with a perfectly happy face, sat at the table and thought about how well his life had turned out. He had been through a lot, but now he felt unusually easy and free.